Don't underestimate the power of interest. It's probably the best way to connect with your students. I 100% guarantee it will spark the love of learning, and your kids will be going home from school raving to their family and loved ones what they've been learning.
Yeah, it builds that connection with you as well.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers, where we're all about bite-sized tips and simple strategies for bright and busy new teachers.
If you're in your first few years of your career and want to make the rollercoaster ride of teaching more fun, streamlined and stress-free, you're in the right place.
We're Ashley and Alicia, the dynamic duo from Rainbow Sky Creations, and we're excited to be your teacher mentors on the go. There are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable. Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for Teachers. We have got a cracker of an episode today because it is about differentiation, and it's the one thing that teachers are saying to us over and over again: we need help with differentiation. Alicia, why do you think this is the case? Why is everyone saying we need help with this?
I think there is this big push to cater for the varying needs of the people in your classroom. I think we've learned to understand that yes, everybody has a brain, but our brains work differently and how we process things is different. And gone are the days where it's bums on seats and everybody looking at the blackboard and the teacher just preaching their knowledge. We are now in a society where we have information at our fingertips. So now it's building those skill sets where we have strategies to be able to obtain that information, but also building up a society of resilient, problem-solving, thinking humans, because they're going into a world, there's a lot going on. So I can see the pressure when you got 24 up to 30 kids in your class and you're like, oh my gosh, this kid needs this and this kid needs this, and it becomes overwhelming. The need for it is high amongst our community.
Definitely. I'm really glad that we've gone down this track of differentiation. I think you're right, Alicia. It is really an overwhelming prospect for teachers when you've got all of those students in your class and you're thinking, I need to cater for every single one of them. But there's a lot of things that we can do and that we probably already are doing that's catering for the needs of our students. When I first started teaching, differentiation was one of those key terms that was just being thrown around left, right, and center. And really, what was expected was that you would have a lesson and then there would be 3 or 4 different activities and they would be on worksheets. I know I'm showing my age here. And then you'd have a worksheet for group 1, which were your high achievers, a worksheet or 2 worksheets for your middle group, and then a worksheet for your low group. And then that was a sign that you were differentiating for your students. You had those 3 to 4 groups every single lesson, every single time. And it was a lot of paper and a lot of worksheets, which we know, if you've been around here for a long time, Rainbow Sky, we're all about hands-on learning. We're all about catering for the needs and age-appropriate learning for students. So that's a bit of a side note. We're not fully into worksheets, but that was what differentiation was about back then. Now we've come to learn that there are so many different ways you can differentiate for your students. It doesn't have to be those 3 rigid groups with 3 separate activities.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The further we went into exploring differentiation and looking back at our teacher journey, we realized there were so many ways that we were differentiating for the learners in our classroom. And I think there's a really important point we need to tap on. A fun fact is, whenever there was a goal for the year of what is your goal as a teacher this year, I felt like every year I'd be going differentiation. And I realized it was because every year I was getting a different cohort of students and those students had different needs. And I'd be there going, oh, I'm not doing enough. And it was more that I really needed to spend time connecting with my students and understanding the ways and the nuances of their learning style and being able to adapt whatever I had in the classroom. That's what we're going to unpack today. We're going to break down at least 8 different ways you can differentiate in the classroom. Trust us, it's not complicated and you're doing this probably automatically. So we just want to reassure you, if you're there going, I need to differentiate, you are already doing it. Let's break it down and have a look at some simple ways that you can differentiate in the classroom. Do you want to hit us up with number 1, Ash?
Yes, the first one is content. And what I was going to say was you might listen to some of these and say, tick, I'm doing that. Great. And then you might come across another one and say, oh, that's a really good idea. I might put that on my wish list to give it a try in my classroom. So I don't think that any of these ideas are going to be brand new to you. They may be reminders or they may be ways of justifying that you are doing a good job in your class. But the first method of differentiation is differentiating the actual content, which is the story that I was talking about at the beginning of this episode, where we look at the content and we give the different levels according to the needs of the students in that class. So we're varying what the students learn and we're providing advanced materials to higher levels and simpler things to the lower levels or those students that need support in our classroom.
Yeah, I used to always have this issue where we would have pre-subscribed text for the students. So we might have every year 2 student having a maths textbook or every year 3 student having a comprehension book. And you'd be like, oh, but this is not content that all my students can access. And then I realized, hello, not every single student has to complete every single question in that textbooks. So I would grab my handy highlighter. And if I had that student who was still working on a certain concept and they couldn't complete questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and beyond 5, I would just get a highlighter and go to that kid, do you know what? I just want you to do this question and this one. And that's all I need you to do. And then you might have some kids who are doing the whole textbook. And you might have some kids where you go, do you know what? Just skip the first 4. I know you've got that. Just do these questions. So you can really simplify it, even with pre-subscribed content that your school requires you to do with your students.
Yeah. Another way you can do this is, for example, in your reading groups, you probably already are doing this. You're providing reading texts according to your different students' needs. That is differentiating by content.
Absolutely. Then we've got number 2, the process. Varying the activities students use to master the content. So think of this along the lines of some students might need to have visuals. They might be using imagery or drawings to present their information. You might have students who are so capable at writing and they're going to write detailed written summaries. You might have students who have so much to say, but they can't get it down on paper and they might record it in audio. So the actual process of the learning can look differently for each student. And think of that as well if you're getting students to present their learning. What we love doing with maths is using manipulatives. You might have students, you're doing a subject on fractions, and you might get the students who are able to write it down in symbols. You get students who they get manipulatives, and some might get the Cuisenaire rods, some might get blocks, some might get Lego, and they're going to show you their thinking on different types of fractions. Don't get bogged down on how the process must look exactly the same for every student.
Exactly. Process is all about that scaffolding and providing the students with the scaffolds that they particularly need. This is one of my most favorite ways to differentiate in the classroom, but my second favorite way is the next one, which is product. Differentiating by what the end product is. So we're varying the way the students demonstrate their learning, and you might even put in some student voice and choice into this and allow your students, especially if they're that middle primary and above, allow them to choose how they're going to represent or demonstrate their learning. So they might be writing something, they might be creating a presentation. This is a really great way to integrate technology into your classroom.
Yeah. And flipping that back to that process of if you're presenting that information to the students on what you want them to complete, you might have the students who have that text, have the steps written down. You might have visuals to go with that process. You might have to just pull some students aside and go, I'm just going to have to give you that one-on-one for them to know that they only get one step in that process they need to complete, while other students might complete the first, second, and third process. Don't think that you're not catering for students when you're actually taking that time to check in with a student, or you're checking in with a small group, or you're getting everybody together and use each other. Like, how many times in the classroom, Ash, would you get a student and you'd be like, hey, Ash, could you go have a chat with Alicia and just tell her what you've done and show her how to do it? And right then and there, that's another way for you to teach a process to a student. And that's differentiation.
That is because you're not only allowing the child who needs the additional help to learn it in a different way from one of their peers, but that peer who is teaching it, that is the highest form of mastery. So if you're able to teach it, then we know that you have got that concept covered. So you're actually covering a few bases by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Then a big one I feel for teachers is pacing. Allowing students to work at their own pace. Did you ever feel like in the classroom, Ash, that you were sprinting through the content with your students?
All the time. I think the first, probably all of my career up until the very, very end, I was always on a sprint because I just felt like I had to fit everything in all the time, and every tiny minute that was available was precious. And I actually changed my mindset around that when I started team teaching with a great friend of mine and colleague named Rach. And she taught me that pacing was everything, and allowing time can be the biggest gift for your students' learning. And I wish I had learnt that earlier in my career.
Yeah, it's such valuable advice you're giving there, Ash. Think about pacing of your students. You're going to have some students who are the hare, and you're going to have some students who are the tortoises, and that's okay. And you're going to have some kids in between. Providing additional time for some students to complete work while allowing students to move forward is totally fine. Think about that time with the content where you've got students who are at the start of the worksheet and you've got students who are ready to go to the end of the worksheet. That's looking at pacing as well. We love fast finish your activities. We love giving students maybe a different task that's got a little bit of complexity to it. So they're going to have more crunchy eyebrow moments. So every kid's going to have a crunchy eyebrow moment, but it might be those working at their basic number facts. And then it's those taking those number facts and problem solving and putting it into a problem. Don't be afraid of the pacing process. It's okay to slow down, and it's okay to speed up for some kids.
That's why we love groups so much. If you're a long-time listener of the pod, you'll know that we love maths groups, we love reading groups. And one of the reasons why is because when you have that explicit teaching with your small group, you can provide your students with the pace that they need. You're not rushing ahead. You're not slowing it down too much. You're really catering towards their needs in that small group. So that's another way that you can pace your lessons and pace your teaching is by doing it through small grouping.
And it's okay to come back to the content. I think sometimes you go, oh, I've done that, I'm moving on. Coming back to that content and looking at it from a different angle is really beneficial for students. And it's allowing them to become critical thinkers and look at things from different angles regarding the same problem. So pacing, we could probably chat about for ages, but we're going to jump on to the next one, which is your learning environment, modifying the classroom setup to enhance learning. Ash, did you do this a lot in your classrooms?
Yes, towards the second half of my teaching, I did this a lot because flexible seating and flexible classroom environments really came into vogue. I was teaching at one particular school that had very traditional classroom furniture, and I had to get really creative with how I did this in my classroom. And I did. I got really creative, and we created different workspaces and different parts of our learning environment so students could really choose what worked best for them, or I could lead them towards it. I set up quiet corners for individual work, collaborative areas. I love having desks in groups so students can work together, but it also allows them to work individually as well. And then following that more traditional school, I moved to a school that had a brand new build, and we had brand new furniture, and it was all flexible
Mm.
seating. We had those cafe bench style seats, we had lounge chairs, we had desks that you could move around. Like, it was incredible. You need to teach the students how to use that sort of learning and flexible seating environment. But it was a really great way to be able to say to the students, okay, this is the task that we're doing. Take responsibility for your own learning and think about the best way that you can participate in this lesson with the environment that we've got.
Yeah, I went deep into flexible seating. I was a bit of the controversial teacher where people would come in and be like, where did all your chairs and tables go? I was like, oh, they're in storage. But it was interesting to see students who loved working by standing. And then I used to have benches against the window, and those who'd like to work and look out where they were near the natural light. And then those who love the collaborative learning. And there'd be times where you'd be like, hey, you guys are pretty chatty today. I need you to go focus, come over to this side and just get on with your work. And we had bean bags and wobble chairs, and you could just see the kids who needed that movement. And you'd be like, all right, you guys are getting all a bit fidgety. Let's incorporate a brain break. But then there were these times to really nurture the quiet, and they had central little reading beanbag couch cushion area. And you could see with the reading groups and the kids getting together, and they were chatting and they were discussing the actual learning. Oh my God, they were actually discussing the learning. And I'm talking year 3 students here. The power of your learning environment can really impact your students. And I found, on a side note, that when I took the tables and chairs out, there was a lot more space in the classroom. Like, it actually felt more spacious. It didn't feel like the walls were closing in on us. And I think we sometimes devalue or underrate the power of clutter and build up in the classroom that sometimes we just need to clear the space for everyone, and it's just going to be a more conducive learning environment.
Yeah. If you don't have the opportunity to be able to get rid of some of your furniture, like I didn't in that first classroom I was talking about, we actually created stand up areas where the students could stand up and work on top of our bookshelves and on top of our cupboards and things. I just made sure that those areas were clear, like Alicia was saying, clear of the clutter. They were just completely clear, and the kids could take their workbooks and work up there. Another thing that the kids loved doing was just working on the floor, lying down on the
Oh,
floor, under desks. Some kids really loved that, just lying under a desk and doing their work. Now, in a traditional classroom, that doesn't sound like it's a very good idea. But if you're allowing them to choose, if you're differentiating the learning environment through the environment, that is another great way to do it. You can get rid of all of the tables and chairs. You might have a school that has got all of the fancy things, or you can just give things a go yourself with what you've got. That totally works.
yeah. You have some cave dwellers in your classroom. The power of working under the table can transform productivity among your
Yeah.
students. And I used to as well. One other thing, if I needed to get tables, you might not have this option, but most classrooms have an outdoor space that I would take about 4 tables or 2 double tables, and I would put them outside against our classroom. And we had windows so I could see them. But just that being outside, the fresh air, it can just stimulate the brain, and the kids can get a good solid 20 minutes of work. And you're like, yeah, that's great. And if you can stretch that out to a full period of lessons, even better. Consider using your learning environment as a differentiation tool.
For sure. I've never had an outdoor space in my classrooms.
Oh, yeah, it was like a little backside alley because our classroom paired up to a nature strip, like a walking tracks, like the bush. Hey,
Cool.
watch out for the snakes, kids.
Yeah. If you're listening from somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, you're probably thinking, what? She's joking, you guys. Are you joking?
No, there were snakes out there. There were some spottings of snakes. Yes, I wasn't joking. Is it equivalent to like in the Northern Hemisphere, like our American friends are like, whoa, watch out for that black bear. It's just on the boundary line. She'll be right.
I don't know. If you're in North America and you've had a black bear sort of roam past your classroom, let us know.
Yeah, or our Canadian friends. I got a friend who moved to
Yeah.
Canada. She's on Vancouver Island. She's like, we have to watch out for the bears and stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh. And the other creatures that terrify me.
Yeah. People say Australia's scary for those sorts of things. There's nothing in comparison to bears.
No, I agree.
All right, let's move on. We've already touched on this idea or method of differentiation already, but it's all about grouping. So, forming groups based on ability, but you can also form groups based on interest or based on learning style as well. And as Alicia said at the beginning of this episode, trying to form a group based on interest or learning style at the beginning of the year can seem like a very daunting job, but that's something that would be far easier to do once you really know your students.
Yes. So think of grouping. We are huge advocates for grouping with like your traditional maths groups, literacy, reading groups, and you look at your students' ability levels and you lump a little group together and you work on content that is set for them at the pace that they are able to complete it. And are we saying that group has to stay together for the duration of your whole term or whole year? No, it can change. So that's where we can look at flexible grouping. As well, you might have a maths lesson where you're doing a maths lesson on, instead of like number, you're doing it on probability. So you can mix up all the groups and do multi-grouping and change the group composition and have students peer assessing, peer mentoring, working together, mixed ability, doing that different activity. So don't be rigid in how you look at grouping. It can be very flexible and very rigid if you want it to be.
Yeah, we love to say that our groups are fluid, meaning that the students understand that they can be changing all the time, and that's okay. They don't have to be in a particular group all year long. One of the teachers that we worked with in Dubai, Becky, she was in charge of maths, and she was the one who really brought it to the forefront of my mind that when we're teaching maths, your students that may be really great at number might not necessarily be the ones that are excelling when you're teaching measurement. And sometimes that pre-assessment data can really help you group the students and regroup them according to what you're teaching. I don't know if Becky listens to this podcast, but shout out to you, Becky.
Yeah, wherever you are, Singapore, New Zealand, wherever it might be. Once in the expat life of teaching, you sometimes never get out and you just love it. So we know a few of our teacher friends who are still in that expat teaching world, which is super fun. If you're thinking about it, you should do it.
All right, moving on. Choice. Choice is about giving students choices in their learning activities and their assessments. So we're letting the students choose a topic to research for a project, or we're allowing students to choose how they're going to represent their work, or we're letting them choose which activity they would like to complete. Another way that we could do this, which for some teachers they may find it a little bit easier, is choice boards. So providing a menu of activities or options to choose from. I'm just going to say as a little side note here, if
Mm.
you're thinking, I'd love to do choice boards, but I'm time poor as a teacher, as all teachers are, AI is a perfect tool, ChatGPT, to help you come up with choice boards.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of AI. You whip up together a concept that you're covering in class, whatever it might be. You could pick a theme that you're doing in your science or your HASC, and you ask ChatGPT, can you list a bunch of different activities I could do for my year 3 classroom on da? And out it spits. Such goodness. And you just
We
copy that, you put it onto a PDF and you're good to go.
Yeah, we love AI. One little tip with AI is if you're working through AI doing exactly what Alicia said, give it feedback. The more prompts you give it, the better. And then tell it at the end, this is what I liked or this is what I'm going to use. Please remember that for next time. And then you'll just get better and better results with your AI.
Yes. You're going to notice in your students where you give them choice and a sense of autonomy over their learning, you're probably going to get some really great learning out of them. And I love to have in my classroom once a term a wow board where students could just share whatever they had been learning about that really interests them and they wanted their peers to know about it. And I think there's real power in sharing learning. And I think the pace of teaching sometimes allows us to think that we don't have the time to do that. And I was guilty of it in the classroom. Chuck me in a classroom tomorrow, I would slow things down and I'd be like, what, Ashley, you want to share something with the class? Great. Share with them what you've learned, what you took from that lesson. Giving them choice is powerful. If you haven't been utilizing enough in the classroom, we highly recommend you give this one a go.
Yes, I love choice, especially for that middle primary, because they eat it up. They love having the choice of their own learning. It's towards the end of the year now, and we have actually got some Christmas activities. We will link those up in the show notes where they are Blooms related activities. And you can give students the choice of which activity that they want to choose. This is a really good way just to test the waters, dip your toe in. It's scaffolded for you as a teacher. Get the students to choose what they want to do and then put time aside for them to complete those activities.
Yes, we have a few. We have some sport ones, we have some back to school ones. Using it, like you say, Ash, around a special event is a perfect way to give it a try.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we've got 2 more, and then we're going to wrap this up for you, our beautiful listeners.
Yes. So the next one's all about interest. So linking lessons to the students. When we taught overseas in Dubai, we followed the PYP program, which is the International Baccalaureate program for primary school. And it was all about tapping into the students' interests, which was great. And the students guided the learning. I know here in Australia, it is a lot harder, but you can do it in little subtle ways. For example, you might be writing some maths problems, or perhaps you're getting AI to help you, and you could incorporate your students' favorite sports in those math word problems. You could be reading particular texts, and you might be choosing texts that you know that your students like or about a topic that they're really into. We had the Olympics this year. I know my own kids at home loved anything Olympics.
Mm.
So there's lots of different ways that you can tap into their interests. It might even be like collecting data. And then you'll be collecting data about the footy cards that they're currently collecting or their favorite sports teams, whatever that they're following at the time.
Now, if you haven't listened to episode 52, where Ash talks to Kylie Altier, where she talks about it takes a village to educate a child, she is phenomenal at connecting with people in the community based on the interests of her students. So if her students are interested in dinosaurs, she's getting in touch with a paleontologist in her local area or in her state. And I think that episode was so refreshing about bringing the outside world into your classroom. So don't underestimate the power of interest. It's probably the best way to connect with your students. I 100% guarantee it will spark the love of learning, and your kids will be going home from school raving to their family and loved ones what they've been learning.
Yeah.
So
And it builds that connection with you as well. If you haven't listened to that episode, you need to go and listen to it. It is incredible. Kylie is amazing.
Yeah, look, I listened to the episode and I've been out of the classroom now for a few years since I've had my babies. And I said to Ash, I feel like going back into the classroom. I'm so inspired. I miss it. I want to be back in there. So have a listen. It's going to reignite your passion, I promise.
Yeah, even chatting to her ignited my passion. And actually, the day that we spoke to Kylie was the day that we actually decided to go all in on our exciting new venture that we have planned for January 2025. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the very end.
And now we've got one last differentiation tool for this episode, and it's looking at readiness, adjusting the level of difficulty according to your students' readiness. So it's providing more challenging tasks, the scaffolded tasks for when students need it. Say you're doing writing and you're starting to write a story, you break it up and you're starting with the introduction where you're introducing the characters and the setting. And you're going to have some students who are ready to fly with that and they're ready to write, they're brainstormed, they're off. And then you've got students where you need to provide that scaffolding. So you've got those sentence starters. They're going to fill in the gap like a close activity and work on creating their own story. That's just a really simple way of doing it. But think of readiness paired up as well with your group. If you're doing grouping, you can pull that small group of students and you can set the readiness at their level. You're going to see them wanting to start to challenge themselves and actually want to take the more challenging task or try something they haven't done before. So it can be a really powerful way of seeing where your students' readiness is and pitching the task right where they need to be. And then you'll see them start to take more brave goals at trying harder things.
Yeah, it might mean going back in curriculum too, going back to previous years and building up some of those skills that they need in order to meet the curriculum requirements for that particular grade as well. I think readiness is something that teachers are really quite good at. I think we really have the idea of being able to adjust the level of difficulty in the tasks and the teaching that we do in our classrooms. And we're quite good at differentiating the content. But we've been talking throughout this episode about all these other different ways to differentiate. And there are so many different ways. This is just the beginning. Alicia and I have talked about a whole heap here, but we have got 2 pages of other ideas. So if this episode was interesting to you and you're thinking, yes, I'd like to know more about how to differentiate in other ways, or have that little sort of mental checklist to say, yes, I'm doing that, or, oh, I'd love to give that a try, let us know, write a review and let us know that you want another episode or 2 episodes about differentiation, because we have got so much more to share on this topic.
That we do. And we have talked your ears off about differentiation today, but we've enjoyed it.
We sure have. Now, before we go, I did say that we would talk a little bit about our exciting new thing that is coming in January. Alicia, do you want to tell them a little bit about it?
Yes, I will with pleasure tell you a little bit about what we're planning to do. So, we are going to open up our doors to a brand new membership at the beginning of 2025, which, oh my goodness, is only really when we're recording this 12 weeks away. So soon. So, we want to really bring back the joy into the classroom and the ease and simplicity of learning. We want to give you access to a treasure trove of resources and tools and be able to be your cheerleaders in the classroom.
Yeah, we are super excited about this. If you can't hear by our voices, we are ready to open up so much that we have behind the scenes. We want to help you enjoy teaching, enjoy the process, help you feel inspired, give you ideas, help you with this differentiation piece, because we know it can be really time consuming. And we are all about working smarter and not harder here at Rainbow Sky Creations. So if this is something that you're thinking, this sounds interesting, I want to know a little bit more, go and jump on the wait list. Those people on our wait list are going to be the first to know about what we have coming and when the doors are open. We will make sure the link to the wait list is in the show notes.
Yes. And that being said, there are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable.